Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the December 10th special meeting of Council. I'd firstly like to recognize we're on the traditional territory of the Sinixic First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Goury. The question period sign-up sheet is on the partition wall near the gallery. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name on the agenda. The start of question period, the chair will call those who have signed up to the podium to address Council. The first item tonight is the introduction of late items. Ms. Goury.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this evening for late items, I believe there are a couple members of council that are wishing to make some adjustments to the budget. So my suggestion would be that after the approvals from the Finance and Audit Committee are dealt with, that then the councillors could let us know now if they do have items, and that they be dealt with right after those items are.
Very good. And those councillors having items, please. Councillor Bonner, Councillor Turley, Councillor Gesselbrock, anyone? Councillor Brown, anyone else? All right.
So a motion for the agenda as amended with those additional budget items would be in order at this time.
So moved by Councillor Hemmens, seconded by Councillor Turley. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Motion for the adoption of the minutes of the previous council meeting. So moved, Councillor Thorpe. Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? All those in favour? Contrary? Motion carried. Tonight we're going to have an interesting evening. By way of the Mayor's report, I'm going to not say anything because we're going to have an interactive town hall discussion to discuss the 2019-2023 financial plan. Technologically speaking, I am a babe in the woods in this evening and trust that all members of the community will treat me kindly as we work through this process. I'm in the capable hands of the IT crew from City Hall. So if we can commence, how do we wish to do this?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'll introduce Mr. Reid Bothright, who is going to be this evening's moderator and facilitator for the E-Town Hall. So if Reid would come up and he can give an intro as to what the E-Town Hall is about and what you can expect this evening, that would be great.
All right. Can everyone hear me? Great. All right. So thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. I've hosted this one before and a few other public engagement sessions with you guys, and it's been a great opportunity for the councillors to have a face-to-face, and in this case a bit of an electronic-to-face conversation with the public. So thank you very much for letting me be a part of this. So we'll be taking questions tonight from the crowd here. So if anyone does have questions, they can either, when the time comes up, just raise your hand, or if you'd like to sit over here, if you have some mobility issues, I'll then be ushering you up to the podium to address your questions to the chair, and then the chair will let the councillors address your questions. And we are keeping this to the topic of the 2019 to 2023 budget. So please make sure when you are bringing your questions up that you relate it to that topic. We want to keep it as succinct as possible so that we can get through as many as possible and just delve into what concerns us most, which is this budget. So all those online who are watching at home the streaming, we will be taking additional questions all throughout the night. You can go to www.nanaimo.ca/go-to/etownhall, or for less typing, cnan.ca/webtownhall. Or if you're on Twitter, you can use the hashtag NanaimoTH, and we've got people moderating those and adding those questions to the queue. You'll see me on my phone. I'm not checking Twitter myself, but I'm checking the newest questions that are coming up. The questions from the gallery are going to be on a first-come, first-served basis. I'm going to try to get through as many of them as possible during this evening. We're going to try to keep each question to a 5-minute answering period, just so that we can tackle as many as possible. I think we had 14 online before we started this. And yeah, so really try to keep it to the 2019 to 2023 budget, have fun. I know the numbers game can be a little dry and some of these things can be pretty contentious, but we're all adults here, so keep in mind that if we don't get to your questions, if you're not able to answer them here, you can still submit them online. If you're online right now and you've got some questions, we will be addressing all unanswered related questions at the end. We'll be passing them to the counselors to take a look at and address, and then posting that on our website in the coming week. So I think that just about covers it. So without further ado, do we have any questions related to the budget from the gallery? Crickets? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, if you'd like to come forward, step up to the podium. And make sure you speak into the mic. All right, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. My name is Amanda Orm. I reside at 98 Fifth Street. I have a question regarding the budget and cannabis legalization and disbursement of taxes. Do you have any correspondence from the federal government on if that tax is coming to municipality, how much it will be, and what sort of disbursements and where it will be allocated?
Can I answer?
Go ahead, Councillor Armstrong.
Last I recall, and this came from the UBCM, that there's still discussions between the province and the federals on dispersion. And then from there, then the province will deal with the municipalities. I know that was a resolution that was put forward at the UBCM, that the municipalities and the small towns would like to have a share of the revenues. That's all I can answer. That's all I know at this particular time myself. Others may know otherwise, but it was definitely a resolution that gained unanimous approval at the, which is the Union of BC Municipalities, that gained approval to take it forward to the provincial government.
No, like call to action for that?
Well, that
Further,
is,
other than just the vote?
excuse me, that is our call to action. It goes through the UBCM, which then deals with it's very civil. And then our representatives at the UBCM will deal with the parliamentarian representation. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks. No, like tentative
Thank you. No one else?
amounts?
Sounds like the best answer you're going to get, I'm afraid.
Not yet.
We're hopeful.
I'll see you later.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. If you do have further follow-up questions that aren't answered, again, we'll get the people through who haven't answered first, and then if we get through all of those, we'll jump into subsequent questions, follow-up questions. As well, our timeline, we're looking at going to 8 o'clock or earlier if we run out of questions. We have quite a few, so I don't know if that's going to happen. And if we do run past 8 o'clock, we'll go as late as 8:30, and then we'll convene then. So from here, because this is an e-town hall, we'll take a question from Twitter. The first question is, what percentage of the budget is earmarked for things such as another tent city, day-use facilities now that housing has been found, rent subsidies, cold, wet weather shelters, and the like? How does that amount compare per capita with other cities?
I suspect no councillor is going to be able to answer that question with accuracy, so Ms. Mercer, I think we're looking at you.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the budget for 2019, there is $100,000 for a drop-in center, approximately $40,000 for the shower program, and about $45,000 for urban cleanup. And that's all we have currently.
Very good. Anyone else? Thanks very much. On to the next question.
Okay, great. So this one comes in from our website. Again, if you want to submit your questions online, you can go to www.nanaimo.ca/go-to/etownhall. This is for Mayor and Council. Will any money be set aside for bicycle commuting upgrades?
Council? Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship. I took the liberty of jotting down a few projects that are in the 5-year plan towards bicycle commuter upgrades, and these include the following. Bruce Avenue from 3rd to 4th Street. The Boxwood Connector, which will be a multi-year project, but it will be incorporated with bike lanes. The upgrades at 4th and Albert. Metro Drive corridor plan, there's a planning for that street. We have a Cranberry Connector in the 5-year plan that will also incorporate bike lanes. There's Wakasai Avenue and 5th Street. There's a plan underway to look at mobility issues in the entire downtown, including cycling. I'm looking at a cycle track around Front Street. We're planning on updating our street standards to more complete streets, which will obviously include all users of the right-of-way. We have an active transportation plan coming in 2020 and sort of an active transportation data collection program coming in 2020 as well.
Thank you, Councillors Bonner and then Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to, I guess, the person asking the question. So I can't speak for the entire council, but I know that we have not had an opportunity to have a fulsome conversation about what our priorities are for our mandate here. So, but I can tell you from my personal point of view is I believe that we will be spending a lot of time and looking at how we can make our streets more mobile friendly and work with smart streets and making more walkable neighborhoods, which would include bike lanes and that sort of thing. So it's something I think most of the councils have even campaigned on. So I would expect we'd be seeing that in the near future.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I think Mr. Sims gave quite a comprehensive answer, actually, and I'd just like to reiterate that I think active transportation upgrades are an ongoing part of our city planning now. When we develop neighborhoods or redevelop neighborhoods, it's something that we are actively taking into consideration and trying to stay a little bit ahead of the curve. So rather than point out specific one-off projects, it's part of our ongoing planning process. And certainly we can look at improving that, but I think we're off to a very good start. Thank you.
Thank you. No one else? Next question.
All right, I'll take the next one from the gallery here. If anyone has questions, we got one from the back. If you want to come forward, step to the podium. Again, make sure you speak directly into the microphone.
Good evening. My name's Sydney Robertson. Related to the last question, I know that sidewalks are a topic that came up a lot during the campaign. They're coming up left, right, and center, it seems to me, on social media, and they come up in conversations with people I talk to. I don't entirely understand how we funded sidewalks so far. My own opinion is that we don't have enough of them. I'm wondering if you've started to talk or you're open to talking about some different models for getting more sidewalks into our city, and maybe specifically for areas that are not new development. What do we do when, instead of waiting for a developer, that's not going to happen on my block. So it's been around about 100 years, so we're not going to wait for a developer. So I'd like to hear thoughts about sidewalks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
That's a concern I have. I think that's something we need to look at when we look at our waterfront walkway project, which is a lot of money. I think we need to readdress that, and I'm going to be bringing that back once it comes up to see. I think the other thing that we need to recognize, and I'm sure Mr. Sims can clarify for me, Chair, is that we do have priorities for sidewalks that are done by staff. Those do get jiggled around a bit. And it's the cost factor. I don't think people realize the exact cost of how much it puts. Like, I was flabbergasted when I heard how much that little Dufferin spot costs. So, but I would defer to staff on that. But for myself, I would prefer to see neighborhood sidewalks that, especially those going to schools, should be a priority to me. And no offense to those that really want to extend the waterfront walkway, but for me, that is a bigger priority. I only speak for myself on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Before I go to Mr. Sims, I think it was to say something. Any other councillors? No. Mr. Sims, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it's definitely a concern among city staff, and we've heard it loud and clear from community members. It's a historic development in Nanaimo. We were a bunch of small municipalities or improvement districts, and those were joined when the city amalgamated, and that's left a bunch of orphan sidewalks behind. In recent years, council's allocated an additional $300,000, and that's general taxation money that goes towards accelerating other discretionary projects, infill type projects. For instance, on Dufferin Crescent this year that was what it was used for. There's a number of elements in the transportation master plan that include not only cycling but general mobility for how do we improve walkability, and that's definitely on the forefront. But it is a cost factor, as Councillor Armstrong mentioned.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Sydney. You did ask if there's creative solutions, and so if you have some, or I think members of the community have some, I think we should absolutely be open to them, because additional sidewalks are cost prohibitive. But there is other alternatives out there that have been implemented by other municipalities. Off the top of my head, the reduction of automobile traffic in certain streets where you don't necessarily need sidewalks if automobiles are going at a safe speed. So there is options that are not just based on money.
Thank you. Next question.
All right, I got eye contact with the gentleman over there, so he's going to address the next question for us. Don't worry, take your time.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Bill Manners from Nanaimo. I was quite disappointed when I read the financial plan to see that the word economic is used once, and it was used in relation to the 2016 strategic plan. Do any of you councillors have any interest in increasing our economic development office from more than one full-time equivalent employee so we can get back on the track to future economic development in our city? I'm going to move away so I can hear you.
Thank you very much. The list of councillors who wish to answer is growing. Councillor Martin first.
I'll keep mine simple since it's first month into the term, but absolutely, on a personal level, economic development is crucial to our city for accomplishing many of the other services that we would like. We need to have economic development, but we are at the beginning of our stages of our strategic planning, and so this time in the budget, we had to make sure that we were balancing and making sure which one is our priorities. And going forward, we are keeping this top of mind. Speaking for myself.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Armstrong.
Well, thank you. I concur with what Councillor Martman said, but I also would like to say that this was discussed at the Finance and Audit meeting, where we had a lot of conversation around it, and one of the consensus of the table, I believe, is that we wanted to hear from all the stakeholders first before we decided on a model. So we thought it was best to meet with our stakeholders first, and then look at that for our next budget cycle in 2019, for the 2020. Because right now, we would be going just blindly into it, thinking that we know what we know, when we really don't know what the business people want, what the chamber wants, what MIBI wants, what all these other groups do. So I think what we were talking about was that there would be some robust discussion. As well, there is an RDN strategy for regional economic growth, which we also would like to partner in on too. So it's a much larger discussion that I think we're going to have, and then look forward to possibly expanding that next year based on community consultation and business consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Manners. I agree, concur with what Councillor Armstrong said. The only thing I would add is that the model that a lot of us would prefer to see is a private-public partnership, where the private realm would look after the sales end of things, and the public part would look after the provision of information to aid in the sales. So, but we need to think that through and get the appropriate partner in line, and of course the appropriate budget number in line. So,
thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just following up on what Councillor Armstrong said, out of the Finance and Audit Committee, we did, I believe, set aside some funds being cognizant that there is existing stakeholders within the community that we should consult with before we develop any model. And then out of our strategic plan, there may be initial things that we want to have consultation on with the community or additional stakeholders. And I believe that amount was set at $50,000. Staff can correct me if I'm wrong.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Very quickly, I agree with what others have already said, but just to assure the audience and Mr. Manners in particular that, of course, economic health is very important to this council. It's important to our city. I think we recognize that, and it's one of the 5 pillars in our strategic plan. The question is, how do we proceed with that and get the best bang for our buck? And that, to be honest, is yet to be determined. It's simply too early in our term to commit to a model yet without proper due diligence. And with respect to Councillor Turley, I'm not sure that the model he's suggesting is necessarily the one that we'll proceed with. We have to have those discussions, but in general terms, economic health, of course it's on our radar and near the top of our list of things to tackle. Thank you.
Mr. Manners, I'm going to jump in here and say this very quickly. We don't deliver social assistance, we don't deliver pension checks, we don't do any of the things that the other 2 levels of government do. What municipal government can do is create communities as best it can that are livable, and livability to me means obviously ensuring that we create meaningful employment, gainful employment that enables people to live here and raise their families and enjoy a reasonable lifestyle. So to second what everyone else has said, we're extremely conscious of it. The fact that we are perhaps being a little cautious is reflective of the fact that the City of Nanaimo chose to elect a new and a very fresh council, and we're going to do it right. But thank you for raising the question. It's very important. Next question.
All right, thank you. So the next question comes in from our website. To Mayor and Council, our neighborhood, in this case Cinnabar Valley, is experiencing nightly and daytime visits from folks who commit property crime. I am sensing this may be a problem throughout our city. When will the city increase the police force members to help curtail this?
Councillor Armstrong, I thought you were going to jump in immediately. We'll let Councillor Bonner go.
Thank you, Your Worship. We actually have this budget, preliminary budget we have, talks about adding 15 more police officers onto the roll over the next 4 to 5 years. But I would like to mention to the public that we are putting money into reactive services, police force. And we need to start looking at ways we can invest money for the future by being more proactive so that we don't have people who are breaking into other folks' house. We don't have people that are committing violent crimes. We need to invest our money for the future, and it's a lot, I've said it before, it's hard for councillors who have a shelf life of 4 years to invest in the future, but I think that this council has shown that that's something that they're very interested in, and I would look to, in the future budgets that we work on, that we invest as much money in the proactive making our cities safer for our children and their children. Thanks.
Thank you very much. No one else?
I'll add.
Councillor Armstrong, you're inspired.
As Councillor Bonner said, but I think the other thing that we have to look at too when you're talking about proactive measures, I mean, we look at how some of our other city agencies have stepped up to the plate to take away some things such as the Nanaimo Fire and Rescue, who now attend motor vehicle accidents, which frees up the police to do other things. We're increasing our bylaws, people, so that they can deal with more of the downtown issues. So trying to do stuff to take away some of the more, I guess, less criminal in nature events so that it does free the police up to do more of that proactive stuff. But as Councillor Bonner said, we're quite a distance from that. But we do need to start thinking of other ways, and I'd like to acknowledge those other departments that have stepped up to the plate to take on additional duties to free them up to do more serious events. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. And I agree with Councillor Bonner that the proactive approach is the most effective. And Certainly, we all want to live in a safe community. That's probably top of our list for everybody. So in this draft budget, as I'm sure most of the audience is aware, there is, excuse me, there is a recommendation to fund 15 new RCMP officers over the next 5 years. Bearing in mind that even if that is approved, we would not be able to see those the first personnel in place for close to a year. So it is certainly on our radar. Our city is growing. The resources that we have of fire and police and other agencies are becoming increasingly stretched, and we need to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you, and if I can just conclude, I think it's fair to say and generally accepted that a lot of that kind of what I will call property crime, petty crime, relates to addiction issues. And addiction issues are not going to be treated unless we have safe, secure housing for our citizens. And in conjunction with the province, I think Council understands its responsibility to ensure that we have properly zoned properties in our community so that when the provincial government and or the federal government is prepared to step up to the plate, provide housing, we're in a position to move quickly to ensure that that housing is built. It's housing first, I think, is a recognized principle, and it's an important part of dealing with the crime issue in the longer haul. Councillor Bonner is quite right. We can be reactive all we want, but at the end of the day, it's not going to solve the petty crime and property crime problem, which is the one that plagues most of us. Mercifully, most of us aren't subject to violence, but I think most of us have at some point experienced being a victim of a property crime in one way or another. Thank you. Next question.
All right, I'll take one more from the internet before getting back to the gallery. This one comes in from Twitter. The Howard Johnson Hotel has been an eyesore for some time, and now it is closed and boarded up, looking even worse. What would council propose for that 7.5-acre site? Thanks very much, Councillor Armstrong.
It's private property, so there's not much we can do. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner has summed up very succinctly exactly that. We don't have control over private property in terms of telling people what to do with it as long as they don't do something with it that breaches a city bylaw, whether it relates to nuisance or behaviors on that property. And obviously, I think all of us are hopeful that that site will be redeveloped appropriately. Next question.
I just want to
Sorry,
add,
Councillor Martman.
speaking as an individual, not as a council, but I will encourage us as we go forward. We have other derelict buildings in our downtown besides the Howard Johnson, and I do believe that we should be looking at exploring different ways that we can address this so we don't have vacant buildings in our downtown or throughout our city. Thank you.
Well said. Any other members of council on this question? No? Hearing none, next question, please.
No one going to jump in? Okay, good. All right, so I'll go back to the gallery now. If anyone has a question or wants to follow up on another topic we've discussed, otherwise I'll go back to my phone. Anyone? Okay, if no one else in the gallery, we want to be fair. You've made the trip, you can have some time. Thank you.
Hello again. So I was just looking through these committee recommendations, and I believe it's number 8, talks about the snow and ice reserve in 2019 to be reduced to $100,000. I think it was a few years ago they reduced the budget. I think Councillor Bonner might remember they reduced the budget, and then we got a big dump of snow, and it kept snowing, and it kept snowing, and there was like tens of thousands of dollars over budget. How are you guys going to deal with that?
Who's going to jump up and answer that one? Maybe Councillors Gesselbrock and Bonner will be Santa Claus tonight.
Thank you for your question. The reserve is an important tool. However, for these events that we can't exactly predict what year is going to be the big storm, we're able to amend the budget at any time and draw from other resources as well within there. So, yeah.
Okay. So the wouldn't make a tax increase for the next year because you had to dip into other pots to cover the extra, like, I know malls in town, their snow removal budget is like $25,000, and the whole city has $100,000.
It's Councillor Bonner next, Councillor Armstrong third.
Thank you for that. What we're talking about here is money that's going into the reserve, not the actual city's budget to remove snow. But I think what you're alluding to here is the whole question of reserves.
Yeah.
Presently, the reserve at the end of 2019 will be in the neighborhood of $500 and something thousand. That's if we carry on with what we are now.
Okay.
If you stick around to the riveting council meeting that we have later on, I'm actually going to address that issue later on in the agenda. But I think it also brings up the question of reserves in general. I think we need a wholesome look, and we will be in the new year looking at our reserves and how much money needs to be in them. Are they necessary? Is it money that's not being utilized correctly? Or possibly. So that's what we're going to be looking at in the new year, and looking at all those reserves. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, thanks.
Next
Thank
question.
you for that. Any more from the gallery? Do we have other questions from the gallery there? Bill?
Hello again. My question is related to, as we were just talking about our snow budget, our sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera. About 5 months ago, I stood before the last council and I asked this question. I'll ask it to the new council because I was told to ask you by our last council. And that is, what is the plan? What are you thinking of doing of increasing bylaw enforcement in the city to actually enforce the bylaws that have been made by previous councils and they're going to be made by yourselves?
I'm going to jump in and answer that partially and let other councillors and staff follow me as appropriate. As most of you hopefully will appreciate, our system of enforcement bylaws is one that's complaint-driven. We don't go out looking for violations. The city municipal government operates generally on the principle that if someone complains, it'll be investigated by the appropriate bylaw officer, and then will be dealt with appropriately. But that's the general principle. So mere passing of the bylaw in and of itself doesn't guarantee a fulsome enforcement necessarily. And I'm certainly happy to hear from any member of staff to respond further to this question.
Could I put a follow-up to that? My follow-up to that is, you mentioned that it's complaint-driven. In the past 4 years, there's been numerous complaints to the city regarding the failure of businesses and residents around the community to clear their sidewalks. And it is up to the homeowners to do that. It's up to the property owners or the person that's renting to keep their sidewalks clear. When complaints have been made to the city, the response has been, we don't have anybody to enforce it. We don't have the personnel available to go out and talk to those people to let them know to clear their sidewalks. That is part of what I was referring to.
Thank you. I'm going to let Chief Fry, who's managing two portfolios, so to speak, for the city, to answer that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So currently on the budget for 2019, we do have an additional bylaw enforcement officer that will be primarily working out of the downtown office, and that role will be to enforce the downtown bylaws, security-related issues, and parking enforcement. And then that will free up the other staff that are located and working out of the Service and Resource Center, SARC building. We currently have 4 bylaw officers out of that building working on a complaint-driven process at this time.
Thank you. The councillors are dropping off after that answer. Only Councillor Thorpe is left.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and there's nothing much more to say except that through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Manners, yes, I agree. We don't have staffing resources to be everywhere in the city to deal with every bylaw complaint, fortunately or unfortunately. And as Chief Fry has just said, we are starting to address that by requesting additional personnel in this draft budget. So I hear your concern. I don't disagree with it. All I can say is we are starting to make an attempt to improve the situation, and it's something that I'll certainly support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley, and then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to you to Bill Manners. So just for information purposes, the budget for the draft budget for this year is 2.9 million, which is about 300,000 up from last year's budget for bylaws.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Armstrong.
I just wanted to say that we did vote for, two positions, and I did vote in favor of both, just for that reason, because if we don't increase those bylaw positions, then those duties fall back to the police on nights and on weekends, which, again, to me is a total drain of police reserves to have to go deal with those issues. And because what happens is if bylaws don't answer the calls, they end up going to the police, and the calls just keep coming in. So that's one of the reasons I did vote in favor of the two new positions, to support the police and the public on their complaints.
Thank you. Next question.
All right. Thank you. So this one comes into us from Twitter. And the question is, what specific cuts, savings, or program changes has Council identified in this budget to ensure our taxes are well spent?
Councillor Armstrong.
I can only speak for myself, but I looked at the public safety first, and that was one of the reasons why I looked at the 3 police officers first for the next 5 years. I brought forward the nice to have the 4 firemen, because I believe that our fire staff are at very significant low staffing levels, which leads to poor morale. It leads to health issues for those that are there. So I feel it's very important that for public safety, those positions get filled. That's the same reason I voted for the parking ones as well. For me, I look at it, and I look at it through different lens than others, but I look at it as those are requirements for me. They're not nice to have. So I cut what I believe to be nice to haves, and some people will disagree with that. Like for me, the active transportation request that's a nice to have right now. I think that would be good in next year's budget, but I think we need to get back to stuff that's going to have a direct impact on public safety first. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner. Pardon me, Councillor Turley, then Councillor Bonner. I'm a little heavy with my thumb tonight,
Okay,
sorry.
thanks. Thank you, Your Worship. If you look at the numbers, currently at 4.9%, or 4.97%, of which 28% of that is a download from the provincial government, just over $1 million for the employment health tax, and also $300,000 for increased WorkSafe BC. So if you're comparing apples to apples with previous budgets, you need to factor that in there to get a more realistic number.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. This was the hardest thing for me as a new councillor. It was this budget. We're being asked to pass a provisional budget in the neighborhood of $200 million, and I've been on the job for less than 6 weeks. And I've kind of looked at this thing, I lose sleep over this because I know this is important and I know it has to be done by the end of the year. But I can tell you that we will be looking at this budget in the new year once we've had a chance to sit down and see what our priorities are. Where do we want to be in the future? Where do we want to move things forward? Right now, right off the bat, I've kind of described this thing as a number of us want to be able to turn the ship, and we're barely got into the wheelhouse. So once we've got our sea legs down, we'll be able to make the decisions and start moving the ship in the direction we want and tailoring our budget for that. Staff has done a phenomenal job to get us where they are now, and I support the budget they brought forward, and I look forward to the conversations that not only council will have, but the general public will have in the coming year on what we want to do with our city and where we want it to be in 4 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Through you, I want to echo Councillor Bonner's sentiment and say that this has been a very difficult process, and not just because the timeline, but because we actually don't have a strategic plan that we've agreed upon. So we want to set the ship in a different direction, but we haven't yet collectively been able to identify that direction. So as for the nuts and bolts of where we're going to pull from and what we're going to cut and what we're going to grow, this budget is reflective, I think, of being 6 weeks on the job. We do have 3 months in front of us where we can kind of continue to tweak it as we do understand our strategic direction, which in my personal preference would involve quite a bit of community input. So I think it's about building blocks, and we're getting there, but it's still very early in the process.
And lastly, Councillor Gesselbrock.
Yeah, this budget for me and I think speaking for council here, has been really about rebuilding. I think property taxes have been extremely low over the last few years because insufficient funds have been put into asset management. Services have been cut, for example, like by law enforcement and different aspects services that the community expects. And when we're in this type of situation, we really do have to rebuild. So this isn't a budget about cuts and keeping taxes low. It's really about bringing our services back up to level so that we can carry on with the city. And one that is like the 1% asset management fund that is really important so that we can maintain our infrastructure. And so 10 years, 20 years down the line, you know, those folks aren't going to be hit with a huge budget increase because their pipes are leaking and buildings are falling apart. Thank you.
Thank you. Dead on time. 5 minutes. Next question.
All right. I think that one dovetails nicely into another one. This one comes in from our website. What will the anticipated asset management plan shortfall be in 2023 under the current budget, and is it anticipated that any further tax or user fee increases beyond 2023 will be necessary to maintain the plan's life cycle needs?
Well,
I can read that again if you like.
Well, Councillor Brown wants to jump in, so we'll give staff a minute to...
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure that's so wise now. But no, I believe in the budget on the 5-year projection, it does not show the 1% in 2023, and that is due to an asset plan revisit, which I think staff could probably jump in and say a little bit more about that. But that 1% was based on a previous model that's coming to completion, and now we will have the chance within our term, I believe in the next year, to develop a new model that will give us some new projections.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we are planning on doing a update to the asset management plan, and at that time, we'll have the ability to make future decisions on whether we continue that 1% asset management reserve contribution, as well as increases to user rates for the same reason. So coming in the next year or so, we will have an update to that and have better information at that time to move forward.
Thank you very much. Next question.
All right, I'll go to the gallery again. If we have any questions there, give you guys an opportunity. Are there any questions? All right. So our next one comes in via our website. Will this council commit to removing the strategic infrastructure reserve from the budget, ensuring that public consultation on future council-initiated projects is retained?
Thank you. No councillors. Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I stated during our budget deliberations, that we are currently undertaking a reserve policy creation. We're creating a reserve policy, and at that time, this will be addressed in that reserve policy. So we will be coming to council probably at the end of Q2 in 2019 to give you an update on where we're at with that and seek recommendation from council.
Councillors Thorpe and then Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Mercer jumped in and really answered the question I think that we are going to be looking at. I wondered if Councillor Bonner had submitted the question. So I can assure the audience that this council has an interest in examining reserves, including the specific one that was asked about. Thank you.
That caused other councillors to drop off. I think for the benefit of the audience who may not understand this, that the city is required, and this isn't one of them, of course, relating to the question specifically, but the city is required to maintain by law a number of statutory reserves into which funds are paid, and they are held only for those purposes as set out in law, which is one of the intriguing ways which the provincial government through legislation has bound the cities of the municipalities and regional districts of this province to steer a straight course and balance their budgets accordingly. Councillor Bonner.
I thought I would just pop in, just because my name was mentioned. But I don't want people in the audience and in the public to get an incorrect view of what I think about asset management and reserves in general. Asset management is a very important thing to cities. There are cities in the United States who have not practiced proper asset management and are going bankrupt. Because they cannot afford to fix all of the assets they have underground and above ground. So I think it's very important that we have a proper fund available for the future so that when our children grow up, they're not facing 20% tax increases like they are in some places in the States. So I'm not opposed to reserves, and I certainly think our asset management fund is very, very important. I just want to have another look at them, that's all.
Thank you very much. Next question.
All right, thanks for that. We're 46 minutes in. I'd like to congratulate everyone for making it this far. We still have quite a few questions, so but we're making a good clip. So if anyone wants to take an opportunity to stand up and stretch, I fully encourage it. The next question comes in from our website. Policing is the biggest part of the budget, but we have uniformed members spending much of their time doing administrative tasks and acting as social workers and bylaw officers. What tools will the budget include to increase the use of non-police staff?
Thanks very much. Does someone want to jump in?
I will.
Councillor Armstrong.
Well, since I'm quite familiar with that, I think I touched on it already earlier. One of the things that's happened in the past few years is we've seen our fire department take on the role of going to minor motor vehicle accidents. I mean, they attend them anyhow, so they will know if police need to attend, like if there's an impaired driver, if it's a serious injury every day. So that's cleared up a lot of time. Paper, you're not going to be able to change that for the simple fact there's been decisions. The Jordan decision is one that comes to mind out of the Supreme Court of Canada, which states that disclosure must be done within a certain period of time. That's another one, as Stinchcomb's another one. So they are going to be stuck doing a lot of paperwork. That is a big part of policing. Again, when you talk about bylaws, that's why I personally voted to have those increase in bylaws, because I do know how much time police do spend on bylaws. People think they don't, but they do. And so I would rather have our policemen working on more serious crimes than parking complaints, which there's lots of, than doing that. So I think that we are working towards that, but there's some courts have the courts and the court decisions, and also electronic file management is extremely time consuming based to the old days of pen and paper. So you're not going to be able to change that. The paperwork is probably 60% of policing. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to follow up on that, Council has heard from RCMP Superintendent Miller, the officer in charge of our detachment, and he shares that frustration. And I know that one thing that he mentioned to us is that he is interested in looking at ways that civilian employees can take some of the paperwork load off of his on-street officers. So it's something that certainly is being looked at, and we agree that we want to free up RCMP personnel for public safety rather than sitting doing desk jobs that they don't maybe have to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. No one else? Next question, please.
All right, thank you. So the next one comes in from our website, and I'd like to encourage anyone who's at home watching that we still are taking questions. I've asked some of the questions that have come in since we started this. Go to www.nanaimo.ca/go-to/etownhall. So this one is for Mayor and Council. I understand expansion of the waterfront walkway being a priority, but I'm confused by the portion that has been prioritized. Why is the connection from the downtown to the ferry terminal not the priority rather than the Departure Bay connection?
I think I'm happy to answer that, although someone else may jump in. That was certainly a priority established by previous council, but this council is a fresh council, and I think it's fair to say, and my colleagues will correct me if I'm wrong, that we will look at the priorities for the expenditure of tax dollars in this community and what things are most important and the best bang for the buck in terms of meaningful recreational and other opportunities for our citizens. And I'm sure someone's going to want to follow me now. Guess not. Thank you. It's nice to have the support of your council. It's unusual in these chambers, I understand, historically. Next question, please.
All right, no comment. Yeah. So this is for Mayor and Council again from our website. Quote unquote, temporary homeless housing has been implemented. When will these locations move somewhere more functional?
Well, I'll happily take that one since I don't see any councillors jumping in. The establishment of the supportive housing units, the one at Labio and on Terminal Avenue, 250 Terminal Avenue, were determined essentially by BC Housing with the support of the provincial government. Those sites are seen as temporary, certainly in terms of the type of housing that's there now. And this will be a long-term discussion for the community. As I've said many times before, it is the job of council to ensure that when the province is prepared to step up to the plate and build and supply and maintain the housing necessary for people who are vulnerable for whatever reason, it's the city's job to ensure that land is available, that community consultation has been undertaken, and that these kinds of facilities and supportive housing units are in fact welcomed into various neighborhoods. The experience by and large in this community, and I point to the Uplands Walk facility, which in particular faced a great deal of public opposition, in fact, over time become accepted and form part of our neighborhoods. And as I remind everyone, as I did today at a TV interview, everyone living in those units is somebody's son or daughter or cousin or brother or father or mother. I was particularly moved earlier when I had a chance to speak to a number of realtors in town when a young realtor asked a fairly sympathetic question after a less sympathetic question had been asked and pointed out that her own mother developed a severe mental health issue late in life and ended up living in the streets. So I think it behooves us as a community to ensure that these kind of facilities are built and maintained. And I think, again, and I hope I have the support of council when I say this, that we're going to do what we can to ensure that our citizens are housed, that we reduce the crime level that's associated with addiction, and that's something this council is committed to. And I'm happy to have someone else answer the question. Thank you. Next question.
All right. Thanks for that. This one comes in from our website and to the Mayor and Council. Is this council going to revisit the $17 million fire hall and the $41 million walkway projects? I think you kind of addressed the second half.
With respect to the fire hall, Councillor Armstrong? Or the
That's
walkway
already
as well?
gone out to tender. It's in the process. However, I would like to revisit the walkway, and I think that's something that I think we will be looking at when we look at our strategic plan review, is some of the projects that don't have dollars committed to it, but the fire hall, to me, that's a must. I mean, the building's old, it's decrepit, it's just not a safe place to be. And I'm sure that they're doing everything they can to mitigate the savings. I think the 17 million was a top dollar that they anticipated, and hopefully will come in under. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Armstrong. The fire hall is out to tender. It is, in my opinion, a project which is absolutely needed, and to delay it any further, even if we chose to, would just cost us more money in the next several years. The waterfront walkway, I think the second look at that is something that council has unofficially indicated that we're interested in doing, and that's certainly something that we can look at again and determine what portions of that we see as priorities, or in fact, if there's other projects that we feel should supplant that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Next question, please.
All right, getting through these. This one comes in again from our website. Based on other cities that subcontract general work, such as the building of sidewalks, cleanups like Tent City, and other projects, would it not be cheaper to hire a local company than have the city of Nanaimo do it?
Very interesting question. I think Mr. Van Horn's going to step forward and answer this one.
So Dale thought he was going to relinquish the seat, but I guess not.
Mr. Lindsay may be more political than you think. He knows you never go up your seat in politics.
Anyway, through the chair and for the benefit of the person who's submitted the question, the city does make use of contractors, various local businesses, as well as city staff for performing services like this. In the collective agreement, there is fair wage language that does pertain when we contract out works and municipal services that are done by our staff, whereby we're required to pay certain wages equivalent to what are made by our employees, as just a measure of making sure that the city is not bidding down to the lowest possible dollar for getting work done. I think, though, for our workers doing the work, though, there are some efficiencies that are gained when we do the work in-house. If you need a backhoe and a truck, do you have two separate contracts? We've got both those pieces of equipment available. So there are a number of things out there that the city does contract, and just to pick one or two particular projects without knowing the other municipalities that are being compared to, I think the city right now is doing that regularly to supplant or to support the work done by our own crews.
Thanks very much, Mr. Van Horn. Anyone else? Thank you. Next
Thanks,
question.
Dale.
All right, I'll go to the gallery once more if there are any other further questions. Did you have a question, sir? All right. Take your time. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Pat McGee, reside in Nanaimo. I was wanting to know, we're facing a lot of legal problems right now and through litigation through the courts. Has there been money set aside in the budget in case we don't win these arguments in court? And if so, where does that funds come from?
Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The city has a legal budget, and at the end of each year, we look at what's outstanding in litigation and accrue what we think we will have for that. And those are the only funds that are set aside. Anything over and above that will come from surplus.
No.
Okay. Councillor Armstrong, are you?
No, I wanted to ask
Sorry.
surplus. Thank you, Your Worship.
Yes. Let me just say that I think it's the hope of this council that we will be discouraging in every way possible litigation involving members of this council or city staff or anyone else. It has not assisted this community's reputation in the last few years, and as much as a still member of the bar, I'm thrilled to see lawyers making decent incomes. I'd rather they make it off other situations than that which involves city council and its members. So thank you for the question, though. Next question.
Yeah, thank you. So this one comes in from our website. Will we be looking at creating more rentable space in Nanaimo for community-focused activities?
Interesting question. I'm wondering if this is something Mr. Harding might wish to answer, and I'm going to assume the import of the question is that they're concerned about what the city may be charging now for the use of our recreational facilities.
Thank you, Worship. I was wondering about the question too. I'm assuming it's maybe just more rentable spaces for variety activities. So in their work plan for 2019 and 2020 is an updated Parks and Recreation Master Plan. In that, we'll be able to survey the community more and see where do we have some shortages in some rentable spaces for any kind of either cultural group or recreational group or nonprofit group. So if that is the tone of the question or the purpose of the question, that'll be looked at, as well as how can we enhance some of the facilities we have now to be more fit to whatever the demand is for rentals.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Turley.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'd also like to add that history in lacrosse, I would like to commend the city for finally having a covered lacrosse box, which then frees up one of the arena's surfaces, ice surfaces, for summer hockey and other ice types of activities. So kudos to the Parks and Rec for building a fabulous facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
All right, we've hit 8 o'clock, and I still have several more questions in the queue. So with your approval, I'll proceed with a few more. Keeping in mind, of course, that any unanswered questions will be collected and answered and posted online this week. And you still have an opportunity through the website to submit your questions. So at home, please do so. So the next one is for city staff, and this one says the fine for unleashed dogs needs to be a true deterrent. $100 is nothing. I was at Westwood Lake and saw at least 4 dogs off leash. Are you considering a higher fine/penalty?
Thank you. Now, there's a very specific question. Chief. I think Ms. Mercer.
Hi, thank you, Your Worship. The short answer to that question is currently we have a fees and charges review going on right now, and this will be encompassed in that, and a report will be coming in the new year with recommendations for fees.
Thank you. Chief Fry, anything to add?
I would like to concur with Ms. Mercer.
Sound like the Court of Appeal tonight. A very good question, notwithstanding the merriment. I think, unleashed dogs, and for those who look after their dogs and keep them on leash, etc., it's a growing concern. So thank you to the questioner. Next question.
All right, I'll go to the gallery again if we have any further questions from the gallery. All right, we have another one from the back there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm another repeat customer. A more maybe global question for you. I'm assuming that you've spent a lot more time with these documents than I've had time to do, and I'm just curious about anything that you found particularly interesting or surprising or that you'd like to call our attention to.
Councillor Armstrong was in so fast you didn't finish your question. Councillor Armstrong.
I think one of the things for me was that our WorkSafe was up significantly, and I think that goes to, I think between our, I'll just say that was concerning to me, that obviously that's a sign that there's either morale issues or maybe there's equipment failures, whatever. Like, I'm hoping with the automation that we don't see the same number of injuries there. I'm hoping by increasing the firemen's personnel that we can get more people back on the road they see significant significant issues that cause operational stress injuries. So those would be, things that we have to look at. And when you get their numbers back up, those through research drop significantly or give them the time to heal faster. So that was a concern for me, which also led to some of my thought process when I was making decisions.
Thank you. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest surprises to me was the previous councils not collecting property taxes. So they had 1 year, it was 0%, which actually made it a negative 1% because we didn't contribute to asset management. So it was -1. The next year, with the asset management, only was 0.38% above it. So by not being fiscally responsible, they have put this council in the position that if we want to get back to just status quo before we start making our plans, we actually have to increase property taxes appropriately. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turley and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Robinson. One of the things that actually I looked at prior to being elected that I found quite interesting was the actual cost per person of the different recreational facilities we have. And it was actually in one of the reports that Parks and Rec put out. And things like community centers, the three of them cost $33.52 per person per year. That's for 92,000 people, divided between the three of them. Ice arenas, which surprised me, I thought it would be higher, is $10.66, and the list goes on. If you're interested, I can. Not everybody's interested in numbers like I am. So.
No, I am, and I think that's an interesting way to look at some of those things.
Yeah. The one that surprised me that people sometimes are concerned about it was the Port Theatre, and it was $5.91. So, anyway, we'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, just to be quick, thank you, Your Worship. What surprised me but also impressed me is staff's ability to achieve what they have achieved over the last several years, considering the lack of resources they were given.
You're here.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
I was just letting that sink in a bit. So the next one comes in, unless we have another one from the gallery here. Want to give you guys some time. So this one is for Mayor and Council. Is the Nickel Street project in the 2019 budget?
Councillor Brown.
Through Your Worship, no, it is not, and I expect it will be brought up at strategic planning sessions.
Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can advise that there's $2.3 million set aside in 2022 for surface works between Commercial and Comox on Terminal Avenue, and I'm presuming this question comes from the context of the Terminal Nickel reimagined. So I can advise Council of that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Armstrong?
Just a question for you to staff. I know MOTI has to be involved in that, or MOT, because it is a provincial highway. And I understand that was done before, but would not new consultation have to happen now? I mean, I heard from many people that were very opposed to that because consultation only occurred in the one little neighborhood, but because it's a provincial highway, they feel the whole city should be involved in the consultation of that.
Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Armstrong is exactly right. This is a provincial highway, and any of the improvements to the highway need to be done with their agreement, certainly.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just add that personally I found the Terminal Nickel project very intriguing, and I'm hoping that we will be able to, in the new year at some point, have another look at it, re-examine it, and proceed with whatever consultation is next and decide as a council if we see that as a worthwhile project. But to me, it had a lot of positives. Thank you.
I concur. Anyone else? Thank you. Next question.
All right. So this one comes in from our website not too long ago. Comments have been made tonight that no strategic plan or common vision has been completed by council. This would seem to be a priority. When can we expect action on this?
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Through the chair, our strategic planning is scheduled for the end of January. So a lot of our time right now has been taken up with general orientation and straight into the budget. So we're all really, really looking forward to sitting down and putting together a strategic plan. Thanks.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think the majority of council, one of their planks, if you want to call it that, in running for council was to, first of all, stabilize the staff situation, and that was a priority because nothing's going to get done until that's resolved. And I agree with Councilor Geselbeck that sometime in January, early February, that then we can get down to doing some more things when we have the capability of staff to actually give us a hand on it. So.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
And I just wanted to add, Your Worship, that I think people have to understand that there's a legal statutory requirement that this provisional budget must be passed by December 31st. So it has to, no, doesn't it? I thought you had to have one done by December. Sorry, let me defer.
Ms. Mercer.
The only statutory deadline we have is May 15th, but we'd like to have it done by the end of the year so that we can start operations.
Oh, there, I learned something. I thought it was statutory by then. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
All right. I'll go to the gallery again if there are any questions. No questions? Start taking volunteers. So we'll go to Twitter now. And this one is, in your budget deliberations, have efforts been made to find efficiencies in city operations? Has phase 2 of the core services review now been ruled out by this council?
Thank you. I think it's fair to say that, sorry, Councillor Martin.
I'm not going to answer to the part 2 of the question, but I just want to say that as a majority of us are a new council, that staff really prepared a combination orientation of every department, the full overview of every budget so we could look at the efficiencies and get an in-depth look as new councillors as to what this budget presents. So we really did get a full binder full of all the numbers for all the departments and everywhere, and good staff presentations that told us where or if there were efficiencies, what we could look at.
Thank you. No other councillors? Councillor Turley?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a slight example of things that we look at with regard to efficiencies. One of the items that was brought forward to us for inclusion in the budget was from the Bill Sims department regarding a transportation overview. And the reason that, in my opinion, it was defeated at that time is because we needed to look at and determine what the inventory is at the present time, what other departments are doing in this area, and furthermore, what the regional district is planning before we decide to put any funding in the budget. But as we say, this is a provisional budget, so that could change in the new year as a result of whatever decisions or discoveries we make.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Armstrong?
And I do want to say that staff has taken the initiative to start doing reviews of things like our reserve budgets and all that, so that we could maybe look at efficiency there. But like people have said, this council's only been in place for 2 months, so there's a lot that has to get done. But staff is taking the initiative to bring that forward to us. So there's lots of reviews being done that will come forward to council.
Councillor Bonner?
And I'll just step in on the second part of that. I would like to see our core 1 done. So let's spend our time reviewing the recommendations and seeing if there's any we wish to carry forward or wish to act on. But we haven't even got that far yet, so I'm not even entertaining anything else until we've finished that one. It was a lot of money that the city spent, and a lot of time by staff, and I think we should have, out of respect, at least finalize it and get it off the books. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, next question, please.
All right. So the next one comes in from our website, and it's for city staff. Asset management. Is the 1% increase each year in addition to the previous year's 1% increase, which at the end of 8 years of increases would be over 8% in total? Sounds like a math question.
Ms. Mercer, please.
Yes, it's in addition to the previous year. So it's compounded over the number of years that we've had that in place. So it probably isn't 8%, but it's compounded in there.
Thank you. Next question.
I should have just stayed standing up. Okay, so the next one. What will the special events coordinator addition be focused upon? Please detail how this coordinator will be assisting towards events so event organizers can fully utilize the coordinator's assistance in relation to the events being planned and held.
Thank you, Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Worship, and I didn't put that question in. So it is a service we had a number of years ago, but it was removed. So it really is, as Nanaimo, there's hundreds and hundreds of events go on. Majority of them, vast majority done by volunteer organizations. So this position is really to help assist those groups more as a one-stop shop where they can find the resources to help with their events.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Bonner.
I was quite looking forward to that position when it came forward. I view it as a way of the city partnering with the agencies and organizations in our community to make these events more successful. My only wish is that we had a little bit more money to put behind the position so that we could have more events in our city. A number of years ago, the city spent better part of $200,000 on a hockey weekend, which showed us what sort of things we can do. And I would like to possibly see that sort of money spread over a year so we have many more events in our city and they're more successful.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. The one area that I would hope that will be covered, which I believe I heard, is the challenge of organizations putting on fundraising events, and then they find out that somebody else has got another event happening on the same day. So if we can have a list ahead of time when information is provided to the city to try to come up with a sheet that would help us to avoid heavy weekends.
Your Worship.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Harding.
Good point. And as there is so many events and so many tournaments, because this will be helping with the tournament organizers, and so that it is helping them, saying to advise them, okay, if you do this, this is another thing going on. It's also linking with a lot of these events bring in a lot of people outside, so it's also linking, at least to advise hoteliers and others that these events are coming in. So it's a broader with that. And just as a quick aside, McPhail Sutton Park alone has over 180 special events a year, and that keeps growing every year. So even now, those are small couple-hour events to multi-day events. So, and then that's throughout the city. And again, so many different groups and organizations putting on some exceptional tournaments, swim meets, soccer tournaments, cultural events. It's really how can we help all those groups make the best use of their time to make those events work well.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a parting comment. As a member of Rotary for over 40 years, this is something we've really been looking forward to over that period of time, because I can't remember the number of times we've organized an event only to find out that some other big event was happening at the exact same time, and we've had to change venues and dates last minute. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Next question.
All right, we got one from the gallery, so if you'd like to come up.
My name is Michael Horn. I live at 450 Vancouver Avenue. And thank you, Richard. You were able to answer the question I had been wondering about the special events coordinator and exactly what it's there for. And that sounds like an excellent plan. But in considering that and in misreading item 7, I began to wonder about whether or not we could have a downtown New Year's party sponsored not necessarily by Parks and Recreation, but possibly by the city. Or could I float the idea? I'll explain the item 7 in a second. But could I float and encourage you to take on in your financial planning a search for an opportunity to have a signature event in the city as many cities do, that's in the constellation of events that different NGOs or groups, independent groups, are coordinating. Could the city itself look for an opportunity to, say, throw a non-alcoholic New Year's party downtown, or throw a big beach party in the summer, something like that? The reason I brought up number 7 is because by glancing at it, I read what's meant to be the very dry $50,000 in a position to facilitate community engagement in the new year. I read that as a community engagement event on New Year's. So now I see it's the new year coming, it's a full year position. But still, the ideas come up, so I thought I'd put it out there, and would anyone have a mind to keep an eye out for something that we could develop as a city, with or without the overseeing of the Parks Department? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harding, or Councilor Gesselbrock, sorry.
Oh, thank you for that. Events are always a great thing, and that's an example of economic development, and what the city can do to support that is something that we definitely want to look at. And about the $50,000 that's been set aside for public engagement in the new year, this council is quite committed to looking at efficient and productive ways to engage the different stakeholders of our community in the decision-making process and helping to set priorities in different areas, economic development, and with parks development, all different areas. And so we're looking forward after our strategic plan to really get that going. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Next question.
All right, this one sounds like a little bit more of a specific one. Will council look at questioning the expenses generated by new standards, such as changing walkway bridge width from 2 meters to 4 meters, for example, with the new Georgia Ave bridge?
Mr. Sims, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This particular example was a council project, a council envisioned project. So staff took the vision that council provided as a policy direction and then applied the best design possible. So that's the resulting bridge width of 4 meters. It suits all uses. Council's welcome to question those expenses if it wishes. That's council's prerogative, but essentially we look at council providing us a vision and we enact that vision.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Next question, please.
All right, this one might be a really quick one. When will the Boxwood connector be completed? Sorry to make you run.
Mr. Sims.
Your Worship, 2022 is our target date. It'll start this year. We'll start with pre-loading, which is a number of loading up the soil to help settle it out, and then the project will unfold over the subsequent 3 years.
Very good, thank you. Next question.
All right, I'm getting a few very specific ones at the end here. When will we get a new roof on the stands at Caledonia Park? We used to have great set of stands with a roof that protected us from the sun and rain. Now we have very hot or very wet aluminum benches.
Mr. Harding, over to you to cool this down.
Thank you, Worship. So we're about, I can't know the percentage, but we're halfway through looking at an overall redevelopment concept for Caledonia. We'll bring that to council along with Caledonia Park, the Stroxman Stadium, and possibly some improvements at Bevan Park artificial turf fields. We'll do that all at once, and we'll hope to bring that in earlier in the new year to show you. It will be a phased component, or phased redevelopments, and of course, again, council determining what those priorities are for those three areas.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. And as was just stated, it's, I guess, comes down to a question of priorities. There's any number of projects, even just within the Parks and Recreation realm, that we could pursue and put money into and get good value. The fact is the old stands at Caledonia Park that many of us remember fondly, were absolutely unsafe and had to be removed. And we put in the temporary aluminum bleachers to serve the purpose, but to cover them, again, would be a major expense, and I think we need to first look and see what is our long-term vision for Caledonia Park and where, again, our priorities are. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please.
All right, this one might be a little bit longer, and we only have 5 minutes left. It might run us to time. So this one comes in from Twitter, unless there's one more in the gallery. Does anyone have a last chance? All right, going once. So several members of Nanaimo Council campaigned on more complete / safer streets for 8 to 80. Question, are any funds being set aside in this budget to address the serious lack of active transportation infrastructure?
Councillor Brown.
Yes, so for those that are listening that are wondering what 8 cities are, I can speak to that because I did actively campaign on it. 880 cities is the idea that if you design a city for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, you've designed a city for everyone. So active transportation, safe streets, complete streets do fit into that well. At our recent Finance and Audit Committee, I did propose a motion that we actually move forward a staff recommendation from a subsequent year to the current year for an active transportation coordinator. But that did not proceed to this meeting. In terms of general funds, there is funds available, or there is funds in the budget for some upgrades, but what I'm most excited about in the work that is currently happening by the engineer departments is taking a look at complete streets, the concept of complete streets, and building them into our design standards. And I think Mr. Sims could speak to that and the general question a little more. So through your worship to staff, if that's appropriate.
Thank you. Mr. Sims, then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Brown, for selling my job for me. So as I mentioned earlier in the meeting today, there was a number of projects that were dedicated to cycling routes and improving mobility for all. But as Councillor Brown hinted at, one of the major sort of fundamentals is an overhaul of our engineering standards. And that is to look at this concept of complete streets, so the entire road right-of-way for all users, not just car-centric, pedestrian and cyclists as well.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
In regards to that too, for me, that's something that I would like to see move to the next budget, which I said at the Finance and Audit that I wanted to move on the 4 firemen first, because I think that's public safety, which to me is very important. And I don't think we can have everything on our wish list. Otherwise, we'd be looking at a 20 to 25% tax increase. So I also believe that our city is doing a good job with that through our engineering staff, that they're looking at all that. New developments are addressing that. And I would like to see us for this year learn more about it, and then next year look at creating that position. So that was my position on that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one quick one.
I think this one's really quick because it's probably directly for staff. Is there any money put aside for road repairs in the new budget?
Over to the Prince of Potholes.
Your Worship, the answer is yes. Seriously though, there's $1.5 million set aside in each year's budget towards road rehabilitation, road repaving programs, and that sort of balance between major roads and side streets. We've been hammered over the last few years with severe winters, which creates more potholes, but I would invite any member of the public to drive around Ottawa for an hour or Edmonton for an hour and compare their streets. I will say that as with everything else, it's frustrating for all of us that costs are rising. The costs of asphalt are going up. The budget has been held for a number of years, and we're going to start falling behind on that. But that's a topic for another discussion. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. And if I may say, firstly, thank you to the members of the audience who participated directly tonight, coming up to the mic. Thank you so much to those of you who contributed through the the modern means of communication. Thank you to staff for answering the questions. Thank you to council for being so forthcoming. I think this is a very useful exercise for people, for council to hear from voters quite directly what their concerns are at the time. And I can assure you that the questions that have been asked that haven't been answered will get answered, and we will do this again. So thank you. Next item on the agenda, present delegations. Mr. Moss, introducing the Planning, Design, Development Nanaimo Society, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me here tonight. Here tonight to give you guys a brief introduction to the PDDN. See if I get this right. Oh, it's pretty small. So when the DNBA collapsed, the members of the Planning, Design, and Development Committee started to brainstorm how we could carry on with some of the short-term, medium-term, and long-term initiatives we've been working on that we believe are critical to downtown and Nanaimo's success in the future. In July of 2017, we incorporated a PDDN, which is a not-for-profit organization that focuses on the planning, design, and development of projects and support of projects that enhance the community of Nanaimo. Our membership currently includes a very diverse group of professionals who are passionate about our city and believe in its future. We believe that deliberate, visionary initiatives by all of our city stakeholders is critical to Nanaimo becoming the successful city we all know it can be and want it to be. The PDDN exists to offer volunteer-based support to those initiatives where we can add value. Below is a list of initiatives we hope to move forward on in the next 12 to 16 months. Tideline Park, GIS ecosystem mapping, and TN Reimagined. Because of the time constraints on tonight's presentation, we'll keep this very brief, but we have put together a more in-depth information session for council and staff on January 16th between 4 and 6 p.m. We'd like to invite you out to that so we can discuss the project in detail and answer any more questions you may have at that time. Tideline Park. This is a collaborative park that was designed in the heart of an existing successful business cluster that is at the corner of Albert Street and Victoria Crescent. The main design intent of this park was to provide strong urban facilities to support those businesses in adjacent neighborhoods, as well as to provide visual clues and activity to draw people across Terminal Avenue. The park design is intended to reflect and mirror the original tidelines and shoreline that was in fact at that Victoria Crescent property line. This project is completely designed and budgeted, but we are still waiting on an opportunity to find a funding partner and collaborate with private landowners in the area to bring it to fruition. The top left is a very quick rendering of how the park would look from Albert Street, and then the bottom right rendering is how it would look looking up Albert Street on the right there from Victoria Crescent. GIS ecosystem mapping of downtown, not the most exciting of terms, but this project is focused on creating an active database of current downtown assets, and that database would then be carried forward into sort of a cluster-based planning exercise so that we could fill in gaps and be very proactive about how we want our downtown to develop and where we want to take it. This project is being developed in partnership with VIU, MTech, and hopefully City of Nanaimo. We believe it'll be a very critical tool to making sure we are deliberately taking this downtown core where we want it to be and putting businesses and doing business recruitment based on what we already have. Currently we have a master's student on board from VIU, and they will be starting work on this in January. TN Reimagined. So we've heard about it a little bit tonight. This project began back in 2012 when the DNBIA took a very simple mission statement of collaboratively and visionarily transforming Terminal Nickel Avenue from what it's been since its inception many years ago. The project was then broken down into 3 pillars: environmental, streetscape and traffic, development strategies and incentives. Currently this project is on hold waiting for some municipal feedback, but we're anxious to move forward with it whenever it makes sense. On the environmental pillar, Step 1 was an area-wide assessment and determination. This determination was successfully issued by Ministry of Environment back in 2014. Step 2 was a area-wide drinking water exemption. We got a long way along this path, but it then stalled out for various reasons, but happy to take that on again if it does make sense. Streetscape and traffic. So in July 2015, a committee was formed and worked with many partners and many stakeholders, as listed above, to reimagine the terminal Nicoll Avenue. This was a citywide public engagement process with multiple public engagement sessions, including an e-town hall, much like we did tonight, trying to capture as many of the public as we could. And at the end, we brought a report forward to council. It was presented to council in December 2016. At that council meeting, staff accepted the report, forwarded the report to staff with what I remember is the direction to review the report against existing bylaws, report back on potential ways to move this forward and to proceed with a functional design in partnership with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, who was one of the partners at the time. One of the important things about this report is it had many different components, and it tried to align these components in different areas and different sequences based on critical triggers. And as Mr. Sims mentioned, one of those critical triggers is the repaving of that corridor. And so there's certain steps that really do make more sense to get done ahead of that repaving or ahead of any major redevelopment along that corridor. So again, subject to council's desire to move forward and where the priorities lie, really don't envy you as a position of trying to prioritize all these different tasks. But there are critical triggers coming up in the next 2 to 3 years, which make it much more difficult to achieve the vision. The report itself, more than we can get into tonight, but the report really is a shopping list of different components packaged into different implementation packages, so they can be picked and chose from as the partners decide. They covered a wide range of topics, but they could be implemented 1, 10, 15, 2. It really was a very flexible report and intended because it tries to cover such a broad range of information. Each one of those components was presented with an order of magnitude budget, presented with options and prioritization, as well as the critical triggers and prerequisites for each one of those options. So tried to present it in really a true shopping list format that allowed decision makers the flexibility to adapt to the times. This is too small to see, but basically what we have is a list of components, the budget figures, a description, critical triggers, and prerequisites for the different packages that were suggested. Different components were broken into individual components. Each component has its own description, its own budget, its own summaries. The one on the left is the functional design. The one on the right is the Bastion Street Bridge. This has become topical lately, and we've been able to liaise with city staff on some of the seismic upgrades that are going on. Third pillar, development strategies and incentives. We can't wait to get onto this, but we need to get some of the other two completed first. So thank you for your time. It's a quick snapshot of what we've been working on the last couple of years, or last 7 years, and we look forward to answering any questions and working with you when we can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moss. Councillors Armstrong and then Thorpe.
I have a couple questions through the chair to the delegation. Number one is that a lot of the stuff you're saying goes against the CEPTED principles. Is that correct? Where I know that when we had to do the downtown assessment, we actually removed a lot of the trees based on crime. So I noticed that your emergency services weren't part of your working group. And quite often what would happen is I remember we put all this dollars into trees, then the crime rose considerably, then all of a sudden the CEPTED assessment comes in and we had to take down all the trees, we had to remove benches, et cetera, because of the crime factor. So that's one of the concerns I have, that there was no consultation with the police or using the CEPTED, because then we spend money, then we have to re-spend money taking out what we just put in. So that was one of the concerns. Second concern I heard was that, especially with the fires that have been happening, that we need 2 major roads through our city, that being one of them, being that it's a massive highway. And the Port Authority, again, has some quite severe concerns about that because of their new the developments that they're doing, that they need, like four-lane highways, et cetera. That's what we're hearing from them. So I just wondered if those discussions would take place later now that there's new partners that haven't been discussed. Ambulance has concerns. I mean, I think fire hasn't been at the table either for maneuvering around those areas.
Through the chair, may I just ask which project we're talking about?
The Nickel Street, aren't you talking about the Nickel Street one?
Okay.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
So on that, we definitely met with fire services. We met with the manager of those services, and they were part of the program as well as the port. So in the report, where I mentioned the shopping list, it doesn't recommend reducing it down to single-lane traffic. It was one of the topics we talked about early on, and then where it ended up was if retail was going to be a strong presence on that, we recommended experimenting with time of day parking, but maintaining a four-lane cross-section through the entire corridor.
So I look forward to coming to your presentation and learning more. I've read some of it, but I'm obviously mixed up on some of it, so I appreciate the clarification, and I'll see you on the 16th, I think.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just hoping, through you to Councillor Armstrong, she could give an explanation to the audience, those at home, and those that may not know what CPTED is, just help explain that.
Sorry, that's crime prevention through environmental design, and that happens. Whenever there's any major crimes, there's a team will come in and they'll make an assessment of your buildings, they'll make an assessment of your home, saying, you know, this head should come down to 3 feet because otherwise you're blocking and people can be doing all sorts of stuff. So it's called crime prevention. You'll see a lot of your parking lots, which are horrific, are done based on crime prevention, environmental design, because it's designed so that criminals can't go in and do a robbery very fast because it will take longer to get out. So there's a whole bunch involved in it, but that's what it means, basically. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Moss, I just want to say thank you for coming this evening. When I saw it on the agenda, I did not know what PDDN was all about, and you've given us a quick overview. I'm very excited. To me, this indicates a desire to move forward some visioning for the downtown area, some possible projects which will really enhance our city. And I appreciate the work that you and your committee have put into it to this point. You've obviously got some great expertise on your working group. I guess my question would be, as you move forward, will there be a formal method of consultation, not just with other partners, but with city staff on these various projects?
We would love that, for sure. Yeah, when we started, we had a much more formal connection with city staff, and that was that deteriorated over the years. But on an informal basis, we certainly liaise with city staff all the time, and we've had very constructive conversations on multiple pieces of these projects.
Thank you. And it has been a concern of mine that some of these initiatives sort of have stalled, if you wish, or have fallen off the radar, and I'm really pleased to see that you're bringing those back. And where council decides to go with them, of course, we don't know yet, but at least it's something very interesting to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very exciting work, and I'm looking forward to the 16th. As Councillor Thorpe said, there seems to be a lot of kind of exciting initiatives going on, but they've stalled. And I'm curious, is there one project that is a little bit more advanced than the others? I'm not talking about quick wins necessarily, but I'd just love your thoughts on that.
Interesting question. So I would suggest that we've chosen to present 3 projects that are fairly well advanced. The complexity of each project is very different. If you take Tideline Park, it's a very small package, there's still some interesting pieces to put together and some consultation to happen with the other neighborhood groups in the area to make sure we're still on the right line based on 2 or 3 years of time passing. You take TN Reimagined, I personally believe that it was a very strong public consultation process that probably is still very topical, and pieces of that could be moved on very quickly as well. The GIS mapping one is probably one that will happen very quickly, but will take more time to become a really useful tool. So each one's a little bit different, and depending on how council would like to prioritize the end goal.
Fantastic, thank you. And a follow-up, if I may, and that's just piece of gratitude, I guess, that I belong to the Bayview Parent Advisory Committee. Bayview is the school that sits at the Five Corners of Victoria, and we live on the water side of the highway, and we actually use the Terminal Nickel Reimagined plan to advocate with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to delay the signal at the Needham Nickel crossing, because half of the school kids come from there, and we had a morning where the crossing guard didn't show up, and there were issues with, kids often just hit the button and run.
Sure.
So it's quite a dangerous intersection. So we were able to use that report to successfully lobby with the government to do some safety measures there. So thank you.
That's great news. Anytime reports don't sit on shelves, that's a good thing, so.
Thanks.
Councillor Bonner.
Worship, and through you to the delegation, thanks very much for the presentation. I really appreciate it, and I'm quite looking forward to this. And I look forward to, with all due respect to Councillor Armstrong, I think as we move forward in the future, making sure that large trucks can pass on our roads is probably not the highest of my priorities. But the idea here is my question actually is to staff, and the new person that we're hiring, the GIS technician, would that be a person that might be able to help with this particular program?
Ms. Mercer.
Your worship, through to Councillor Bonner, that is something I can follow up on. Just at this point, I don't know.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Moss, thank you very much. Much appreciated tonight.
Thank you for your time.
The next item on the agenda is a motion with respect to the adoption of consent items, but I understand we have some late items that are going to fit in here in terms of withdrawal or suggestions, Ms. Gorey?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the process for right now would be that you would get a motion to approve the consent items. If any member of council wishes to remove one of those items from the list for separate discussion, you would then discuss that after you have voted on the items that remain in the list. So, and then after that, the late items that council wish to add could be then discussed. So it's going to be 3 steps. First, the consent items will be voted on altogether unless there's items that need to be removed. The removed items would then get dealt with, and then any subsequent motions that have to deal with the budget would come next.
So, are there any consent items we wish with Councillor Martman?
Oh, you meant we moved the whole
No.
consent item first.
No, we remove them first, I believe, Ms. Gurry, correct?
Yes, you can remove the items you wish to remove before moving on the
Yes.
remainder of the list. Yes.
So, Councillor Bonner first, according to my electronic list here.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to remove number 8 from the list.
Number 8. Councillor Turley.
Yes, Your Worship. I'd like to remove number 12 for reconsideration.
12. Any further items to be removed? If not, I would ask for a motion for adoption of the consent items to the exclusion of numbers 8 and 12.
So moved.
So moved. Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now, with respect to the removed items, number 8. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. With regard to item 12, I believe the current motion is...
Sorry,
that-
to 12 or 8?
I'm 12, he's 8.
Then we should let Councillor Bonner go first, I
That's
think,
a good
just out
idea.
of fairness.
Age before beauty.
8's before 12.
Your Worship, I wish to put a motion to combine snow removal reserve and the Parks and Recreation snow removal reserve into one reserve, make the total annual contribution of $175,000 and cap the reserve at $800,000.
Is there a seconder?
And,
Councillor Brown? In terms of discussion?
If I may?
And then Councillor Gesselbrock?
I was just itching my eye, sorry.
Sorry?
I was itching my eye.
Don't go to an
Auction. Good advice.
Sold.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. And it's not like I'm picking on reserves here, but this is one of the ones I was interested in. It's the 175,000 would be an annual contribution for the next remainder of this budget that we're passing, which would be 4 years. It's my hope that by doing that, it possibly frees up some money for some other positions, but it should also not reflect increases in the budget coming down the road.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Through you to staff, I'm definitely not opposed to the idea of bringing these two reserves together, but I'm curious why they're currently separate. Sorry, the two reserves, why are they separate?
Ms. Mercer.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Hemmons. It's just been our past practice, and it is something we're looking at for our reserve policy, is to come back with one reserve, is right now where we're looking at going with that. So that is in the works already to look at, if that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't support this. I appreciate Councillor Bonner's intent, but I'm not comfortable playing with our reserves. I'll use the term playing, redistributing our reserves until after we have had the discussion workshop on reserves in general, which staff have indicated will be happening in the new year. And I think this is part of a much larger discussion, so I'm not prepared to support this aspect of moving reserves around. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Hemmons?
May I just confirm, thank you, through you to staff, when is the reserve conversation happening? Is it before we have to pass the budget, or is it after? After, okay, thank you.
And just to be clear, when we say after May 13th, that's when we have to pass the budget, is my understanding. Mr. Rudolph?
Your Worship,
You were.
You were on.
There we go.
The question is, when will we be dealing with the reserve policy? The answer is when council tells us they have a priority, and we're doing a priority session next week. But I expect it will be as soon as we can get to it in the new year. It could be a two-phased piece. It could be rolling out the information around reserves, and then secondly, reshaping that to as far part as the new policy on reserves, or the updated policy. So it's a kind of a two-part question. We're targeting to have our provisional budget adopted by council or approved by council in January, so it's unlikely you'll have that by that time. You will have that, though, by the time the final budget is adopted in May.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph. Any further discussion? Councillor Gesselbrock?
Through the chair to staff, I'm just curious, the motion put forward by Councillor Bonner, would that free up funds and sort of level out taxation over the next 5 years, free up funds for this year and level out taxation for the next 5 years? Thanks.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Gesselbrock. There will be no impact to 2019, but that would be a $100,000 reduction for the 4 years after that. So that would put $100,000 back into general revenue that can be used.
Each year?
Each year.
Councillor Armstrong?
I concur with Councillor Thorpe. I think this needs to wait until we have the full picture on where reserves at and what they're at, so I'll be opposed to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion defeated. Next one, Councillor
Worship?
Shirley.
Your Worship, could I just get confirmation of those opposed one more time?
Yes, those who are opposed.
So there's, so Your Worship is opposed as well. Okay, thank you. Do that.
Number 12.
Yes, Your Worship. Number 12, the motion, I believe, read that the council include an additional 4 career firefighter positions in the 2019 draft plan. I would like to amend that to change the word 4 to 2 with the provision that over the next 2 years, it would increase up to the 4, giving a little more flexibility in our budget. Do I need to explain that?
So just so we're clear, for the sake of drafting, what you want is a motion that says that would amend this to read that council include an additional up to 4 career firefighter positions to the 2019.
Over 3 years, yes.
Over 2 years.
3 years.
3 over 2 years. Pardon me, 3 over the next
3 years.
3 years.
Your worship, just to clarify, originally, Councillor Turley said that he wanted to change the 4 to 2, which would read that council include an additional 2 career firefighter positions to the 2019 draft plan. So if I could just get clarification that that's what Councillor Turley means, then with an additional 1 over the next, the further 3 more years, or?
No, if the additional 2 to make it 4 would come in through 2020 and 2021, so 1 each year.
Oh.
Ms. Gurry, I think I'd like you to read out the motion before I ask for a seconder, so we're just clear what we're seconding here.
Your worship, if I could actually have Councillor Turley give it one try with the motion that was there, and then just because I am.
I did change it a bit.
Yes, you did.
I would like to move that council include an additional 2 career firefighter positions in the 2019 draft plan, and then in years 2020, 1 additional, and 2021, 1 additional, for a total of 4.
All right. Do we have a seconder? We don't have a seconder.
Oh, I tried.
Thank you. That deals, I believe, with all the items under 9. Yes,
Your
sorry.
Worship, I would then.
Sorry, Your Worship.
Sorry, yes, the addition.
Just before you move on, you actually, because that item was pulled out of the consent items, you now need to vote on that item as it was presented. So it needs a mover and a seconder, and you need to vote on it.
Both items.
So I would move that council include an additional 4 career fighters positions in the 2019 draft plan.
Yes. Seconded. Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Councillor Turley? Motion carries.
Thank you, Worship. Now, Councillor Brown can carry on. I believe he had an additional motion that he would like to make, or is it?
No nice.
Yes. Number 8.
So Your Worship, I would then move that council reduce the contribution to the engineering and public works snow and ice reserve in 2019 to 100,000.
And is seconded. Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we're done with items 9. So the next is reports. 2019 Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Resolutions. Ms. Gurry, please.
Thank you, Worship. So I apologize, I didn't jump in soon enough. So I believe that there was an additional motion to be dealt with after regarding budget issues, and I believe it's Councillor Gesselbrock that would like to make an additional motion or a subsequent motion.
The last thing I'd want to do is
Or
cut out
Councillor
Councillor Gesselbrock. So
Whatever.
Councillor Gesselbrock, your motion, please. Sorry. Trying to hurry things along too much.
Yes, I would like to make a motion to add the Recycling and Policy Advisor position for consideration to add to the budget. This, so this,
Seconded, Councillor Brown.
This item came up during the Finance and Audit Committee deliberations, and in the proposed draft, it doesn't come with a requisite increase to the budget in terms of taxation, primarily because the money set aside for this position was being given to the Nanaimo Recycling Exchange to provide 3R services in recycling. That was education around recycling and different aspects of auditing the recycling program and providing policy advice. By adding this position to the city, it would basically just be moving that function that we're currently exporting outside back into the city. And I think I campaigned on improving our recycling system, and I think this is one of the necessary aspects that we've been paying for all along that we need to make sure is maintained into the future. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Gurry, I'm hesitant to jump ahead now. I've been called back twice.
I'm sorry, Your Worship. I would just maybe take one more look around and ask your councillors if there was any other budget items so that then staff can prepare the 3 readings to come before you next Monday. So if there's any
Councillor
further...
Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I would move that the position of the Active and Sustainable Transportation Coordinator be added in the 2019 budget.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. Discussion,
If I
Councillor
may.
Brown.
Sorry? It was considered at the Finance and Audit Committee, which is just a recommendation to Council. So therefore, it's not a reconsideration. It's a new motion for Council to consider.
So we haven't voted yet on the consent items?
Yes, we did.
That wasn't pulled up when we voted.
No, so Your Worship, through you to Councillor Armstrong, that item wasn't on the list because it was defeated at a committee meeting.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. If I could speak to that item just briefly, I did sort of speak to it quite a bit at the Finance and Audit Committee. But my understanding is that the position will assist engineering staff with the planning and implementation of active and more sustainable transportation in our city, also with the focus on the Transportation Master Plan. I do believe this position is very important, hence I'm bringing it again, is because we do have the OCP, we do have the upcoming Complete Streets policies, and I would like to see a position that sets the tone that this type of development and infrastructure is supported in our city. It ensures all modes of transportation are part of our collective ethos, and so that we can have a healthier, more equitable, more green city. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm voting in favor of this as well. I think it's very much needed for our city, and it will start us down the road of sort of changing the ship direction. Not that I'm bitter or anything, but I would remind that council, had they passed my motion, we could have afforded this position without a tax increase. But
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I am in full support of this motion, as I was at the Finance and Audit Committee. And I'd just like to say, Councillor Armstrong, you've been very vocal about coming at your decisions from a public safety lens, which I really appreciate. I come at my decisions from a community health lens, and we had a presentation by some Island Health folks at the RDN recently that told us that 44% of our healthcare spending is spent on preventable chronic disease management. And I don't think having an active transportation coordinator is going to solve that by any means, but I think it is a step in the right direction when we're trying to create a healthy community, getting people out of their cars, paying attention to the planning that we have done with community consultation, where we are creating urban nodes and good transportation in between. And then also just, I think what I heard on the campaign trail and what a number of us, I believe, heard is that this is actually really important to our community. So I'm in full support.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I remain opposed at this time. I'd like to see it in next year's budget, once we've done our strategic plan, once we've done our OCP reviews. I think it's a great position, but I just don't think at this time that I'm willing to support it at this time. I'd like to see more of that done. We don't have a very active transportation in this community. We don't have good bus services. We don't have a lot of that stuff, so I don't think we're at that position yet until we get that done through the RDN to improve those structures. So for me, I won't support it until we do our reviews, and then I would certainly look at supporting it, the 2019-2020 budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Through the chair to staff, I was just curious if we could get a description of that position again, please, if it's possible.
Mr. Sims?
Thank you, Your Worship. So Yes, I can provide a bit of I made a few notes here, but in anticipation of the discussion. So a number of the work will be coordinating some of the existing events that have occurred, some of the Bike to Work Week, some of the safer routes to school, stuff like that. Our existing staff worked at about 500 hours off the corner of their desk. So that's about a quarter of the year's work. Upcoming work that we have for a position like this would include managing projects, sort of our active transportation plan, liaising with the OCP group, providing that input to support the OCP redevelopment. The data collection side of things, which will track cyclists and walkers' routes from their Strava watches and develop hotspots to help us direct our investments. And then develop policies around where are the hot spots for pedestrian improvements, where are the hot spots for cycling improvements. And then it'll be almost a marketing and education role as well to help, as I think I mentioned in the finance and audit, to take it into the schools, to market to younger kids and so on. So, and then the last one, I believe council's been lobbied by car sharing, and this position would help develop some standards around car share or bike share programs. So there's just an overview of some of the things that we can envision at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be voting against this at this time because I think we need to have a discussion with the regional district with regard to their plans, with regard to transit and how that's going to fit into this whole scenario. And my understanding is that discussion hasn't happened yet, but if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I tend to agree with Councillor Turley on this one. Yes, it would be nice to have, but I look at our overall situation and I feel we have a lot of gaps in our staffing and our needs for the city as we start to move things forward. And to me, this is not just a priority on the same level as items relating to public safety, RCMP, fire protection, bylaws, garbage collection, and so on, which are major services to the city. So I would like to be able to support this. I hopefully will be able to support it in the future, but at this point, I can't. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Chair. I originally was opposed to this position. In large part, when I first heard the description of the position, I heard that it was primarily for events coordination around like Bike to Work and school education. And although I find that extremely important, I think that what is really important is that we are working towards building out our active transportation infrastructure and moving forward projects, moving forward the transportation master plan, and identifying areas that we need to improve. Hearing Mr. Sims' description of a much more holistic and encompassing position, I think that this is the position that we need to sort of really move the bar forward. And I think that in terms of priority, when I hear about global warming and how it's going to impact our community and the larger world, I think that we need to take leadership in these areas and really send a signal out to the community that Nanaimo's taking this seriously. And I think by having this type of position and somebody designated towards focusing on it and not having current engineering staff working on event coordination off the side of their desk, I think that we're going to be better served. And hopefully if we have safer streets and more pedestrian, we are actively benefiting public safety as well. So I'm going to be voting in favor of this position. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any further discussion? Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I also will be supporting this, and I understand that the RDN does, the transportation is in RDN's hands, but this, as a transportation coordinator, contributing to our OCP, data collection, policies on our hotspots, and the 500 hours that is already being taken up. I think that we heard loud and clear during the campaign that transportation was important, and there's all aspects of that besides it's foot traffic, it's bicycling, it's making our streets safer, and I see that as going along with safety, along with our fire and our police, it's making our streets, and a transportation coordinator can help us with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
Just through you to staff. So with salary benefits and everything, is that a 0.11% tax increase? Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Councillors Turley, Armstrong, and Thorpe. Motion carries.
Your Worship, before we move on, a couple of things. I just wanted to basically, if all of council is done making motions on budget adjustments, that this will basically conclude those adjustments and staff will prepare the bylaw for its 3 readings on Monday. So I think that is what we need. If Ms. Mercer could just confirm that.
Yes, that's correct. We'll talk about report dates, but our time. Just wanted to recap that approximately with the adding of this position, it will be approximately 5.08% tax increase.
All
Okay,
clear,
and-
everyone? Any questions of staff
Okay,
at this point?
Yes, and the one further thing is there was a scheduled recess for 9 p.m. We're slightly past that, but if council wouldn't mind a 10-minute recess before we move on to the last couple of items on the agenda. That's just.
I think we can safely say we want to carry on and get the evening done. Seeing no disagreement with council, thank you. The next is item 10, and that is reports. So 2019 Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities resolutions. Ms. Curry?
Thank you, Worship. I was so wrapped up into budget that I've lost my background information that I was going to provide regarding the AVICC. So I'm just going to bring it up on my phone, not to be rude. It's just quicker than my laptop. So before I go into the purpose of the report, I just want to give councillors, some that are new to council, a little background on AVICC. So the AVICC is the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. It's one of 5 area associations of local governments within the province of British Columbia. These area associations operate under the umbrella of the Union of BC Municipalities, UBCM. The Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities, AVICC, is a body formed for the purpose of representing in one organization the various municipalities, regional districts, and other local governments of Vancouver Island, Sunshine Coast, Powell River, the North Coast, and the Central Coast. The AVICC has 53 members that represent the municipalities and regional districts and is the longest established area association under the umbrella of the Union of BC Municipalities. The objectives of the association are to secure united action among its members to promote greater autonomy within local government in cooperation with the Union of BC Municipalities and other associations of municipalities and regional districts in British Columbia for the advancement of the principles of local government. The annual general meeting and convention is held in April each year, and it provides members with the opportunity to bring forward issues and concerns from their individual communities throughout resolutions and debates. This event attracts over 275 delegates and guests, sponsors, and exhibitors, and is aimed at being informative while giving members an opportunity to share their issues. The AGM and convention is held in a different region, community each year. This year, the regional district and the city of Powell River will be, I think it said Gathet Regional District. This is from their website, by the way, so this is their information. The city of Powell River will be joint host for the annual general meeting and convention. It will be held Friday through Sunday, April 12th to the 14th in Powell River Recreation Complex. All resolutions must be received by the AVICC office by February 7th, 2019 for inclusion in the program. UBCM urges members to submit resolutions to area associations for consideration. Resolutions endorsed at Area Association annual meetings are submitted automatically to the UBCM for consideration and do not need to be resubmitted to UBCM by the sponsor. UBCM and its member local governments have observed that submitting resolutions first to area associations result in better quality resolutions overall. The UBC Resolutions Committee reviews the resolutions for submission to its convention, and resolutions endorsed at the UBCM convention are submitted to the appropriate level of government for a response. So on the agenda this evening, there is a report and and background information from previous resolutions that have gone to AVICC. The last couple of years is attached. So tonight we are looking for council to identify any topics that council wishes staff to draft resolutions, and then direct staff to then present those resolutions to you at the January 14th, 2019 regular Committee of the Whole for consideration of adoption and submission to the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities 2019 Annual General Meeting and Convention. So that is the purpose of it on this evening. So we're just here to get ideas. We'll go back and craft those resolutions, and you can have a fulsome discussion in January at the Committee of the Whole.
So just to be clear with council, council's not expected to come up with the gems tonight. We're just passing the motion that enables us to deal with those gems at a later time.
Exactly.
Yes, very
Give
good.
staff some ideas to formulate resolutions and come back and ask you and present those to you.
Thank you. May I have the motion as set out? Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in? Councillor Gesselbrock.
Through the chair to Ms. Gurry, just a point of clarification, are you looking for topics tonight from council, or do we have time to think about this? And
not tonight.
Either or. So if council wanted to let staff know their topic ideas, we can then bring those back to you in January, and you can agree and endorse them to be moved on to AVICC. Or you can give us some topics this evening if you've already had them on your mind. Either way, it works.
I'm sure Councillor Gesselbrock will appreciate the opportunity to discuss things with various members of council to get some sense of what might be appropriate topics, but not making any suggestions, of course. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Just through you to Ms. Gurry, just another point of clarification. In our agenda items, we have included 5 resolutions from 2017. Are these just kind of for your information? And if they are that, we don't need to do it now, but I'd be curious whether these passed and went on to UBCM and what the outcome was, just for some background for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Worship. With all due respect, I read this report and looking at the deadlines, thought that they were staff were anticipating potential topics tonight, so they have time to prepare them. So if we are shifting our approach, I'm not clear what it is.
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Councillor Brown is right in a sense that yes, if council does not have topics on the top of their mind and wishes to discuss this and come up with them, we would need them as soon as possible so that we do have some good wording and availability ready for you to pass on at the Committee of the Whole. So I would ask that council not take too long to think about it and get us some topics right away, if not tonight.
Councillor Armstrong.
Just in regards to Ms. Hemmons, or Councillor Hemmons' thing, none of our resolutions made it past the AVICC.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I am aware of the time constraint on this, but I don't think I don't personally think we'd be well served to try and brainstorm some wording right now off the top of our head. And I think the intent is to take this away, give it some thought, look at previous examples, and then approach staff to come up with some wording which would then come back to council early in the new year for us to approve or not to advance. And I don't know if Ms. Gurry wants to comment on that.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to council. Any way council wishes is fine, but definitely not asking you for wording tonight. We know that takes some crafting, and there is special actual ways it must be worded in order to be accepted, so staff would do the work on that. But if you want to provide us topics this evening or as soon as time permits, that would be either way.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Yes, Your Worship. I see the CAO is looking to speak.
Process, Your Worship. I do think it'd be completely in order for any councillor to submit a topic this evening. We can deal with the wording part of it in January. Just to comfort you a little bit, it goes to committee of the whole. We actually are probably having 2 or 3 of those meetings in January. I think that that would then feed into a council meeting in advance of the February deadline. So there is time. So it would be helpful first. And so I guess you could identify that tonight. I think if any councillor has suggestions that they would like to be considered at the meeting, the committee of the whole, if you put some time to put it in writing, that would be helpful as well. So staff get a heads up on that and maybe be able to be more value at that meeting. So I think what Ms. Curia is indicating is that we'll dedicate a subject timeline in one of the committee of the whole meetings in early January for you to round this out. So tonight was I think we were leading you to believe, and I think some councillors might have thought that tonight was the night to get it on the table, and I think that's a good idea, but there will be other opportunities either this evening or over the next couple of weeks if we'd like to submit ideas for consideration as well. So I'm talking same language, but trying to comfort you that there will be clarity of process after Christmas.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph.
And just further to that, just any way we can accommodate council, we're willing. So tonight, tomorrow.
Well, we've been talking for quite a while. I can confirm that we did have a seconder in this motion. We've had significant discussion. Yes? All those in favor of the motion? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you. So we all have some homework to do now.
I would actually like to propose some motions because, and they're open for debate, and I don't expect them to be moved, but I don't want to direct staff to individually to do some work if it's not endorsed by council. So I would actually propose as a topic for AVICC, and this is very rudimentary because I thought we'd be discussing about ideas, but the DCCs for additional items such as fire halls, recreation centers, expanded facilities, expanded park considerations, and cultural facilities be considered by the provincial government in the appropriate legislation.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Gesselbrock. Thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah. Oh, you go, it's your motion.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. My mic's not on. Okay, thank you. The reason I think this is important, it's been a topic that has emerged at UBCM for quite a few years, 1992, 1995, and most recently the Parkland was considered in 2015. The city of Nanaimo actually had problems, not problems, but in their DCC bylaw, certain parts rejected. I think with the new provincial government, we have an opportunity to consider some changes to the legislation. And just because if these powers were granted does not necessarily mean municipalities have to implement new DCCs. It just gives new options. The most pressing example, I think, actually comes in terms of fire halls. If we think that, we have a large area of Hammond Bay that is not adequately serviced by a fire hall. If all that development had been contributing to a DCC, that fire hall could have been built by now. So that's just basically the justification for that.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
I concur with everything Councillor Brown said. It's been to the AVICC once before that I'm aware of, and it wasn't explained properly enough. So I think that's something that we as a council need to work on if we agree with it, so that our motion gets put across to them better, because it wasn't even looked at. So I think it's a very valid point that these could be used to help us build much needed infrastructure in our community. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Unanimous. Thank you.
I think so.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is just more of a heads up than anything else. I'm working with someone right now regarding cannabis production on ALR land, but they may be in the position of doing most of the legwork. So if that happens, I'll just be bringing it forward.
Very good. Thank you. If no further motions under this section, yes, sorry, Councillor Martin.
And this is just to say on topics, just to give you a heads up, because I'm very interested in cannabis and retail business and the provincial licensing, us on business licensing. I don't know if we need a motion going forward, but I really don't want to just see Shoppers Drug Mart selling online. I want this to be mom and pop shops being able to be successful in our local municipalities.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Your Worship. The second topic that I'd like to put forward for Council's consideration is in relation to property taxation. So, the idea would be that the provincial government review property taxation to permit taxation zones by density. And I can speak to that if there's a seconder.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. Discussion, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. So in 2004, there was quite a rudimentary motion that was received at UBCM that did not proceed, that was answered to by the provincial government, and that was for taxation zones based on urban and rural population densities. I can appreciate the sentiment behind that because Section 202 of the Community Charter allows us basically to tax by parcel, by areas of parcel, or by frontage. But when I think about equitable taxation, there could be properties in our downtown core, for example, that have a high assessment value, similar to those in more suburban areas, yet their impact on city services is not the same. We do know that more dense development has a lesser taxation burden, so I think it would be interesting if the provincial government would at least entertain the idea and do some analysis about permitting taxation zones by density, in addition to the other taxation methods that they allow. Again, this would not, just like the frontage or other taxation powers that we have, would not be a requirement. It would just be up to a local jurisdiction, a new tool to decide how they plan to do property taxation.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Brown, just a question of clarification. Is that one of the reasons we're moving more towards the user fees, because it is more equitable, would you say?
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you to Councillor Armstrong, yeah, I think if different people have different philosophies around taxation and around user fees, but my understanding is that municipalities are tending to go towards user fees because those that use the service more heavily, or in terms of planning for those particular services, it does make sense.
Yes.
Would that be a staff report? Would staff be able to do a report for us before that goes to the AFACC?
Mr. Rudolph.
Or is it BCC?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, obviously we'd have to give you some preparatory notes and briefing notes and a bit of a report on this. Part of that's the research through UBCM. Part of it is our own working knowledge of the subject, and we'll be delivering whatever we can for you to make an informed decision around this, and what the wording you're looking for is and what the ask is, so that it's clear. As I mentioned to Councillor Brown in one of our conversations offline here, was there's probably a history, and as Councillor Armstrong mentioned, to a number of these files, and so the first thing to do is to double check with UBCM if there's any history. I think you indicated 2004, that's good research. But there's been a lot of change since that time, so presumably there's new information that's available to rationalize this, and we'll deliver some additional information for you at the meeting in the Committee of the Whole in January.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll be voting in favor of this motion. I think this is a key instrument in how we do our asset management going forward. This allows cities to be more flexible in how they raise their funds, and how various people who use more or less of the facilities, our infrastructure, can pay more or less for it. So I'd be in favor of that.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Brown or whoever wants to answer it. I don't know if it's my hearing aid, what it is, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, I can't hear you. So could somebody explain to me? Maybe somebody that I can actually hear. So it's just, it's all fuzzy. I can't hear you, so.
Councillor Brown.
Your Worship, if I may try
Why don't you just not talk through there, then I can probably hear you.
to Councillor Turley.
Okay, I'm reading your lips.
Basically, the intention of the motion would be to lobby the provincial government for new taxation power to tax properties based on their density, in addition to the current taxation powers. This is not necessarily something a municipality would have to implement. It would just be a new tool in the toolbox.
So my understanding is that, don't laugh, it's a serious question. My understanding is that the taxation is currently per unit, is that correct? Square foot? I don't know about square foot, but I thought it was per unit. Is that correct? No?
Mr. Rudolph.
Taxation is based on assessed value, and our mill rates, what you're looking for is a method to differentiate where, on a basis of density or a mix of uses.
Okay.
I think that's part of it.
Okay.
I think Mr. Rudolph is exactly accurate. I'm not aware of any other basis on which property taxes are assessed.
So I guess my understanding that was incorrect is it's probably the tenants that pay their portion to the property owner then on a per unit basis. Okay, that's fine. Yep. I get it now.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Through you to staff, I just want to ensure when we get that extra information in January that we're not just looking at what the original motion was, but why it didn't pass, so we can hopefully bypass if we're really interested in getting this thing going.
Thank you.
One of the good things that UBCM does is gives a reason why they haven't supported it. So in their summary resolution documents, they always give a report on why they support it, why they don't. So there's a whole policy division in UBCM of staff that actually work on this, make recommendations to a committee, which then makes recommendations to the floor of the UBCM convention. So, and then all the regional organizations submit in advance of that. So there's a whole layering of things. So there's bound to be a track record on just about any of these topics that we could try to research.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph. Any further discussion? Councillor Turley.
The only concern about it is if we're trying to encourage more denser housing, is this going to be, depending on the rate, I guess it could be a disincentive.
I think that's an interesting proposition, but I think in fairness, Councillor Turley, that it would be used to in fact reduce the taxation on denser areas, taking into account that they require less infrastructure. Anyone else? Well, that was quite the debate over just whether or not we get the motion to AVICC. All those in favor? Contrary? Unanimous. Thank you very much. I'm glad we have disagreements once in a while. They take less time. We have no bylaws tonight on the agenda, Ms. Gurry. Correspondence, we have two pieces from the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities requesting nominations for Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities executive members. Any motions arising out of that? Hearing no motions, I'm wondering, given the looks on council's faces, maybe we wish to put that on another agenda for consideration?
Your
Ms. Gurry?
Worship, there is no problem. We could put it back on, maybe as other business, somebody wanting to be appointed. It's not a requirement. It is just an opportunity if some member of council wished to be on the executive. So yeah, we could put it back on. I wouldn't put it as under correspondence, maybe just under other business for nomination or that sort of thing from a member of council.
Very good. Can I exercise my enormous executive authority to ask for that, or require a motion?
We'll put it on a future agenda.
Thank you very much. Correspondence from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding Clean BC initiative. I don't think that requires anything unless anyone wants to make a motion. Item 13, there's no notice of motion. 14, no other business that I'm conscious of. Question period, Ms. Guri. Do we have anyone who wishes to ask questions tonight? Thank you very much. Dorothy Houghton, agenda item 11. Good evening.
Hi, Mayor and Council. As far as bylaws, what I'm wondering, is there a bylaw currently in place that requires owners of either empty or derelict buildings to, if they're empty, to occupy them, like a time frame where they are only allowed to be empty for so long, or the derelict buildings to be dismantled? Is there a bylaw stating that
Thank you. That's
they're
very
only
good.
allowed to?
It's a very good question. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to let Chief Fry answer that.
Through your worship to the delegation. Currently, there is no bylaw in place requiring people to habitate a property, but there is appropriate methods within the community charter for council to demolish a vacant building if it's for public safety reasons and deemed to be hazardous.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor?
Please, if you wish to ask another question, sure.
Yeah, I'm just, okay, so having heard that, the many derelict buildings that we have in our city that appear to have safety issues, in my view anyway, I mean, they look like it. So that's an enforcement, like, I'm not sure if you...
Through your worship to Ms. Houghton. So in order to deem a property as being dangerous, frankly, there's got to be evidence, there must be evidence that would be supported in order to make a consideration to council that it is unsafe. So whether in circumstances such as fires, we would have multiple fires within a building, and you have to avail all your other resources, including boarding up the building in order to stop people from entering it. So those are things that we currently have in place within our fire order or fire bylaw that would require it to be boarded and secured. That would be a first step. Second step would be to include fencing or gating, and then even insofar as security on site in order to keep it secure. We would need to have evidence of multiple interactions and break-ins with people habitating within it, and an inability that someone from the public would potentially be injured if they went into the building.
Right. What about eyesore? Like, that's,
We already...
I know that's another subject,
Yes.
but
Under the section bylaws, it says none, but I'm being somewhat indulgent tonight because we have, in theory, nothing to talk about under bylaws, but I'll let Chief Fry answer that one too.
So insofar as an eyesore, that's up to the eye of the beholder, I would say, and it's the person's ability. If it fits within an unsightly premises, which would be a lot of accumulation of garbage and rubbish around a property, that would be an eyesore, and we would issue an order through a bylaw to clean up that property, which would provide the property owner time to remediate that. And insofar as if that is not met, then the city would take that on and then bill back through property taxation.
Thank you.
Right.
Ms. Houghton, I'm going
Okay.
to...
I've got one more.
I'm going to just suggest that these questions, I think, are ones that are suitably directed to staff as to oppose to the whole of council, and you might be able to get a more fruitful discussion than talking to staff at 20 to 10 at night, but it's just a suggestion, so we'll give you one more go, please.
Right. Okay, so the buildings that are now boarded up and made safe can also look fairly derelict and unsightly. Okay, question to you guys. What are your opinions about such buildings? And will we be doing something about that?
Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Hemmons.
Through you to staff, because I don't think we have a mechanism that allows for that, do we? I think, first of all, the charter comes in, that's what it comes into for, like, times to build and all that kind of stuff. So, because I think we've gone that through empty lots, that, you know, they go bankrupt or whatever, but is there a mechanism where we could create our own bylaw to say that, and I guess, again, you're gonna have to, what's a community standard, but is there something in place? I think the ones that come to mind often here is what's going on with Jeans Burns, but you have to look at that still with the insurance stage, so we can't force anybody to do anything until the insurance finishes that. A&B sounds another one that comes up, so is there anything from staff that you could talk about around those, or like Front Street where we've got the old Malaspina Hotel portion or whatever? Thank you.
Chief Fry.
I believe through the planning and development, they were working on a bylaw similar to that, but there's a lot of other considerations council should keep in mind. There are a lot of new buildings that remain vacant that are unleased. For example, there were ones on Mary Ellen Drive that remain vacant for a long period of time, and council needs to take those into consideration as well.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Through you to Ms. Houghton, I just Googled it on the city website. Bylaw 7242 is a bylaw to authorize property maintenance and standards. It might form an interesting kind of backgrounder for you as you go forward with these questions to staff.
What was that number again?
7242.
7242?
42, yeah. I Googled derelict properties in the bylaw section of the city website.
Beautiful, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Before I ask for motion for adjournment, I just want to pay my compliments to council tonight. Oh, no, pardon me.
Sorry, he was
Sorry.
there.
I pay my compliments to council. Tonight we actually had some votes that weren't unanimous, and council acted in the kind of respectful way that I think the people of Nanaimo elected us to behave, and I just want to pay my compliments to all of you. So thank you. A motion to adjourn would be appreciated. So moved, Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. No discussion. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you very much.